So the first time I saw this mower, it was sitting on the curb in a well-to-do neighborhood, and to be honest, I really didn't get a good look at it until I got it home. That's when the real mystery starts. It's obviously a Craftsman mower, but what engine is on it? To be honest, I thought it was a Briggs flathead, but things didn't make sense. Come to find out, the mystery only gets weirder from here all the way to the end of the video. In today's video, we're going to look at this Craftsman lawnmower, and the problem is that it won't start. Now, according to the ad, it said it wouldn't start and the self-propel needed fixing. Fixing, that must be the new word for missing and needs replacing. Oh well, we'll deal with that issue when we get there. Now, I've already made a video about this mower, and if you want to see that video, there should be a link to it at the top of the screen or at the end of the video. But before we try and fix it, I need to give it a quick cleaning. That way I don't get dirt in places where it shouldn't be, like inside the carb, the fuel tank, or even inside the engine. The other reason I need to clean it is because I need to keep my hands clean since I'm filming it. Now, I don't mind getting my tools or my hands dirty while working, but getting my video equipment dirty is something I try to avoid doing. That may not apply to you, but it is important to me. As you just saw, the pull rope is not retracting back into the recoil like it's supposed to, and if you saw the shorts video for this mower, this happened while I was trying to see if the engine would start. But I guess the recoil had other plans instead. Now, while I'm cleaning this mower, I'm going to talk about this mysterious engine and about the other issues I see concerning this mower and entertaining the idea of getting it working again. Now, I'm not sure what kind of money I can get for it. Hopefully, it'll be worth my time. So the biggest giveaway that something weird is going on with this engine was the carb and the filter cover. I was very uncertain what I was looking at. If this was supposed to be a Briggs engine, it would appear that the filter cover comes off the engine from the front and that the primer bulb was facing the wrong way. After taking a glance at the bottom of the carb, I soon realized this was not a Briggs engine but something else, and some of you watching might already know what it is. Before I spoil the mystery, I'm going to take a good look around and see what the rest of the mower looks like. Now, by the condition of the packed grass under the mowing deck, it would seem that it hasn't been used in quite some time, so I doubt the gasoline that's in the tank is still good anymore. Although year-old gasoline should still work. Fortunately, by the oil level and color, it would seem that it was at least taken care of despite having been modified by taking out the self-propel. Now, the color of the oil is really strange, and it also smells really different. If I had to describe it, it smells like crayons. Now, despite the old gasoline and the state the oil is in, I still think we have a good mower on our hands and that we need to figure out what's wrong with the recoil, and then we can try starting the engine. Of course, we can bypass the recoil by using a drill with the socket that fits on the flywheel bolt. But first, we need to start cleaning it, so this is the reason why I even bother doing this part. It gives me a chance to examine the machine and, more importantly, the engine, and what this one is telling me is not good. What we find is a fair amount of oil covering most of the engine. The issue is that I'm not even sure where the oil is coming from. That's the reason why you should blow off any loose debris from your mower after each and every mow, and then when needed, clean any dirt and oil away from it. That way you can see if there are any issues that you need to be aware of. Now, this machine is not new. In fact, there's a good chance this mower is old enough to vote and maybe even get a drink. That's what happens when you take care of a machine like this one. You end up having it for as long as your kids are in school. The first area I want to take care of is the grass that's stuck under the mowing deck. The reason you want to bother doing this is moisture and rust. This will also show that this mower was used on grass that may have had some moisture on it. In the end, the clippings will clump and collect under the mowing deck. Now, is this important to do? Not really, but I would recommend doing it at least once a year, either at the beginning or at the end of the mowing season. Even if you do it every other year, it will help out tremendously. For this next part, I'm going to remove the blade for two very good reasons. The first one is because I need to sharpen the blade, and the second reason is because I can clean the mowing deck a lot easier with it out of the way. Now, you don't need to be able to eat off the mowing deck, so the scraping I did right before this should be good enough. But since I plan on selling this one, I'm going to make it at least look nice if the buyer should happen to take a peek. This is when we get to see just how bad the oil leak is, and well, it's not good news. Even after the first round of degreasing and rinsing, the bottom of the engine is still covered in oil. That means I'll need to do another round of cleaning. After that, it should be good enough to help track down where the oil leak might be coming from. Now, since the self-propel has been disabled, I'm going to remove the pulley and the belt, and for good reason. The biggest reason is to make the mower a bit tidier looking, and the other reason is because I doubt I'm ever going to bother replacing what's missing, which is the entire transmission. The reason is because this part is now obsolete and you cannot get it new. Now, you can still find it as new old stock, but there's more to it than that. So what about getting a used transmission then? Now, this is a bit tricky. This mower is extremely heavy, and the worst part is that it's front-wheel drive. The traction the front tires don't have make the drive system not work as well as other systems. The other reason is because you don't know how many miles are on a used transmission, so there's no guarantees if it'll last 1 year or 1 month. The other one is the cost to replace it really digs into the profit margin for a mower like this, so in this case, I think it's better to leave it alone. Now you might be saying, wouldn't replacing the self-propel make the mower worth more? That way you could sell it a lot easier, and the answer is yes, but there's one huge problem. So what's the price difference from where it sits now and one that has a working self-propel system on it? Is the difference the same amount as adding the new parts back onto it? If so, then there's nothing gained. However, if the amount was a lot more, then yes, it's worth the effort. Just remember, you're dealing with a lawnmower here and not a car. A car that starts and doesn't drive anywhere is worthless, but a lawnmower that starts and has no drive is still worth something. Now, I'm not sure why most of the drive system was taken off, but I'm sure they felt it was getting in the way of just pushing it around the yard. However, I think they might have been overthinking their issue. You see, most times the drive is designed in such a way that there's only a small load from the wheels when not working. And most times the wheels just need to be well lubricated along with the axles. The transmission does not need to be removed, so they could have saved themselves a lot of work, but it's done now. While I was cleaning, I found this loose fastener just laying on the deck, and it was only because it was blocking the drain opening that I even noticed it. For someone else, this may not mean anything, but for me, this is very telling, only because I recognize which fastener this is. Now, if I was using a 3000 psi pressure washer, I might have missed it, but since I'm not, I was able to notice it. The strange part is that there should be one more fastener just like this one, so I'll have to keep my eye out for it. The reason is these are very important to this mower, and it's also a clue as to which engine this is. Once the cover is off, I'll tell you what it is. After getting the fuel line off the carb and draining the gasoline that's still left in the fuel system, you can see that it's very orange in color. This is a pretty good indication that this fuel is well over a year old. So the chances that this mower was even going to start was pretty low. And for those of you who are tired of waiting to find out which engine is on this mower, here's the tag for it. If that doesn't give it away immediately, it'll be a bit more obvious here in a bit. When I took off the fuel cap from the tank, I also noticed that the silver bell that's supposed to be there was missing. For those of you who don't know, this part of the fuel cap is part of the venting system and is vital to how the air displaces the fuel in the tank. Basically, without it, fuel will not leave the tank the way it's supposed to, so we'll either need to replace it or we need to find the bell, and I think I know where it might be. Now, I'm not an engine expert, but I will say that this was the most confusing engine to have to deal with, as far as taking it apart. The nuts and bolts seem to be placed in random locations, making it very strange. I can only imagine what kind of headaches the factory workers had when installing these parts. Oh, and if you haven't figured out which engine this is by now, you're going to have your answer very soon. The other giveaway is the way the fuel tank fastens to the rest of the engine, because it's the same system as the more common version of this engine. Now, this one was putting up quite the fight, but after outsmarting it, it finally gave way. After that, it's just a few more bolts. Oh, guess what I found sitting at the bottom of the fuel tank? It's our silver bell for the cap. I'll show you here in a bit how to reinstall it. After removing the last few bolts, we can finally take off the cover and also find out if we need to replace the recoil. So it appears that the recoil attaches to this cover, but it's not attached anymore. I think we found out where those loose fasteners came from. After testing the recoil, it seems to be working, but I think the spring inside it is binding because of a buildup of surface rust. That means we need to clean the rust off, and I'll show you the easiest way. There's also quite a bit of grass and dirt sitting in the starter cup, along with a lot of dirt and oil on top of this plate. Now, since we know this engine has something of an oil leak, we'll need to clean it the best we can and see if we can find where it's leaking from. Otherwise, it could leak out too much oil and then we'll lose the engine. So for those of you who haven't figured it out, this is a Tecumseh engine, and this one by far is the weirdest one I've seen as far as flatheads. The reason I was so confused was because of the carb and muffler orientation. This is not their typical engine design that has the carb and muffler on the same side, and this is only the beginning of how strange this engine really is. After getting as much of the loose debris off the engine as possible, I'll then use my trusty degreaser again and my sprayer to clean it up. Hopefully we'll get it clean enough to find where the leak is coming from, but to be quite honest with you, none of this oil I'm cleaning is fresh. It all looks to be years old. That means there's a good chance this leak we're looking at took 2 decades to get there. So I might be worried about something that really isn't even an issue. However, I've gotten this far with the cleaning, so I might as well finish it, and then we'll start to figure out what's going on with this engine. After I get this part of the cleaning done, I'll then let it dry off and we'll see just how much better it looks. Now, this cleaning is not for vanity's sake, although it can easily be taken that way. I need to do this because everything I've seen up to this point has me concerned about a possible oil leak. But once here and after inspecting it, it would appear not to be as bad as I think it is, so the cleaning did its job of getting me to look at it. Now, I don't expect people to do this type of cleaning, and that's fine. As for me, I enjoy this part of it. Now, it's not as fun as diagnosing, but it has its good points. So I'm going to do something that I really don't want to do, which is to get rid of the last part of the drive system. I know the previous owner did the hard part of getting rid of the transmission, but they left the rest of it in place, maybe in anticipation of replacing it. Now, as for the recoil, this type is not serviceable, so we cannot take it apart and clean it and put it back together, at least not easily. So instead, what I'm going to do is to spray brake cleaner in the spring area and then work the spring. This will do basically the same thing, but in a way that anybody can do it. I had to do this multiple times until it started to work the way it's supposed to. After doing this for about 2 to 3 minutes, I then sprayed a small amount of lube into the spring area. Now, normally I wouldn't do this, but this one was bad enough that I felt it was needed. After a day, I came back to it and tested it again, and it was still working just fine. After this part, I really wanted to start the engine, but I need to put the blade back on because it acts as a counterweight for the engine, and as much as I wanted to test out the newly loosened recoil, I opted to instead use a drill and socket on the flywheel bolt. Now, be very careful doing this because you can hurt yourself if you're not careful. So it started and ran for a few seconds, which is great news. At least we know that it works and that any time and money we put into it will be worth it. Next, I'm going to try to keep it running for about a minute or so and see if I can find that leak. Now, I didn't show it all mainly to save time, but I had it running like that for about a minute. I wanted to see if I could find the leak either from the top of the engine or from the bottom, and it looks like I have a small amount from the bottom, but I can't be sure just yet if it's gasoline. I also found the second fastener I was hoping to find, which is great news because the two I found are used to attach the recoil to the top cover. Now, I don't see any fresh oil from the top of the engine, but to get a better look at it, we'll need to remove the flywheel, but that's going to be in the next part of the video where we try to fix what's keeping this engine from starting. Now, when I first started working on this engine, I really didn't know what I was in for. It was kind of strange and very different from what I normally work on, but to be quite honest with you, it was kind of refreshing. Right now, the engines have been mainly Briggs for the most part, and even though I think they're easy to work on, having a head scratcher once in a while is kind of nice. Now, after looking at this mower, I might consider keeping it for myself, and if it doesn't sell, I won't hesitate to do it. And the reason is, I think this mower is unique, at least from my point of view. It may not be in yours, and I'm okay with that. In the next part of this video, we're going to tear into the carb and look under the flywheel and see just how strange this engine really is when compared to other brands. So my question is, if you saw a mower that had the transmission taken out for whatever reason, would you consider getting it if the price is right, of course? Or would you insist that if it had self-propel from the factory that it should be there, otherwise you're not going to buy it? For me, it's not an issue, but the mower better be cheap. Thank you for watching. I really do appreciate your time here. Please feel free to ask me any questions about this project or about your own projects, and I hope to see you in the next video.